A new world order is being processed at this very moment. And it's going to be led by the Pax Americana, the American global superpower. And it's going to be one where a Manifest Destiny 2.0 emerges, whereby America will believe that they have this divine right, this divine mandate to be the power around the world. And so Venezuela has been toppled. Yes, Nicolas Maduro and Venezuela has been toppled by the American regime. And they point to the Monroe Doctrine as part of the justification for this. Now, the Monroe Doctrine basically means that no foreign powers can influence in America's sphere. And if they do, America has the right to challenge those powers within that sphere. Thus, you have their overthrow of Venezuela in their sphere, in the Americas. You see? And so this is not the last of the American Empire 2.0 that's going to emerge. Already there's talk of there's massive protests in Iran right now, and Iran is facing challenges by the same power, by America, and by another power, Israel, and they could very well be next on America's hit list. And Russia is also engaged in a multifaceted war with the European Union, with Ukraine, with NATO, and they are also in the crosshairs. And so, these different powers around the world that would be a challenge to the American domination of the world, the Pax Americana and those sort of things, they are sort of facing crises at the moment. Those powers that would be a challenge to the America-led and world-dominated system that is emerging as we speak. And it's funny too, because after the Cold War, America was the uncontested sole superpower, no doubt about it. But there's still little pockets of resistance around the globe that resist the Western-led hegemonic order, the globalist world order, if you want to call it that, and prefer a multipolar world order where there's different spheres of influence rather than a unipolar world order, which is the one American system and everything revolves around it. And so that's what's happening around the world. And the Bible does speak about this, because in Revelation chapter 13, you will see that there are two powers in the world mentioned. There's this beast power, the first beast, which has like heaps of different elements of other nations in it. It's got like the bare feet of Persia, and it's got the body of a leopard, which is Greece, and it's got the mouth of a lion, which is Rome, which is Babylon, and it's got the horns of a dragon, which are the Roman powers, the Roman European powers. And so you see this beast, and this beast in Revelation chapter 13, this first beast. Basically, it represents what we can call the old world, And America, which is the second beast, represents the new world. Thus, you have this idea of a new world order. So the old world, that's the colonial era, right? You had all these different powers, Greeks and Persians and Romans and barbarian invasions and Islamic invasions and colonialism, whether it's Spanish, whether it's French, whether it's British. You had these old world powers fighting on the old world continent. And Europe was obviously a major player in that, and they're the focus as well in this prophecy, because they end up going to all the world and colonizing most of the world. But we're living in an age when it's post-colonial, New Zealand pretty much is separating its ties from Britain, A lot of the islands have gained independence. A lot of African countries have gained independence. India is independent. Pakistan is independent. A lot of those South American countries as well, which were under Spanish and Portuguese rule, they gained their independence, So the old world, the world that was before this current world order, this new world order that we're living in, was the European colonial old world system that existed. And now that's basically disintegrated. It's disintegrated and it's distilled into a form which we know as the European Union. Okay? That's what remains of it, really. If you think about it carefully, it's the European Union as this distilled form of the old world which once dominated the globe, That's the first beast power. For thousands and thousands of years, this was the world power. It was this European colonial world order. Now, we live in the new world. We live in the new order of the ages. And that's the American Empire. And the Bible says that the American Empire, he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. So, if you think of colonialism, that's the first beast. Powerful, massive influence, religious influence even. It's saying that this new world power, which we know as America, will have so much power that it will have the power that akin to what Europe had during the colonial era. And do we see that? Do we see that? Religiously speaking, much of Protestant Christianity and a lot of Protestant denominations and a lot of religious denominations, they have their headquarters in the United States of America. And a lot of Hollywood, a lot of music, a lot of cinema is based in the United States of America as well. And now when we think of NATO, military alliances, global military alliances, yet again led by the United States, we think of the United Nations, which is based in New York, based in the United States of America. And so this is a global power. This is a global power. And we think of the military power too, bases all around the globe. All around the globe, from the Pacific all the way up to anywhere else in the world, it's just massive, from Africa to the Pacific, from the Americas to the Pacific, actually, all the way through. And it's truly amazing. This new world power has emerged. And the Bible says something very interesting about it. It says that it will have 2 horns like a lamb, but speaks as a dragon. Lamb, right? Prophetically speaking, that is Christ-like. You look at this power, you think that's Christian. Lamb, 2 horns like a lamb. Speaks as a dragon, that's deception. That's persecution. That's lies and deceit. That is hypocrisy. Because you think outwardly that it's Christian, but really it has ill Christian intentions and motives, deceptive, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you want to call it that. And we do see that America is a very religious society, but it will and it does engage in wars of conquest and other things in order to assert itself around the globe. And so there is a new world order processing or emerging even as we speak. As I've said, America went into Venezuela and it's trying to assert itself around the globe. And I believe this is what Bible prophecy talks about. It needs to assert itself around the globe to the extent that it rivals or surpasses even the European power around the globe during the old world order or the colonial era, even. Now that's happening even as we speak. It dominates the world economically, dominates the world militarily, and its rivals are going to be knocked out soon. Venezuela's been knocked out. Iran is next on the hit list. Russia's undergoing a war of sorts. Well, a war, that's very significant. And I mean, China's certainly not on the good list of America. It's definitely on America's naughty list. So, this is what's happening. And what was characteristic of Europe during the old colonial era was religion. Religion played a big part. And there's a lot of hysteria right now around migration and nationalism. So there's big migration protests happening around the world, and people are a little bit scared that their societies are going to change fundamentally by uncontrolled migration, especially of the Islamic sort in Europe, and of course in America it's the South American sort. But let's stick to Europe for a moment here. So a lot of people are scared of migration, and it's kind of, if you really think about it, it was the Europeans who first colonized the world and went into people's territories and sought to establish themselves as global powers. And when you're a global power, you incorporate different things from other nations, So, India and Africa and South America, all of them had all the culture that existed there was absorbed and incorporated into the European systems that were being established there, which exactly fits the first beast of Revelation 13. It has all these elements of all the other nations, So it absorbs these different nations. And so migration, or immigrants, let's call them that, or foreigners, have always played a big part in European society anyway, because they were forcefully absorbed into the empire, and it was good in that you had diversity, you had people, you had the exchange of ideas, but you had a lot of injustices as well. But anyway, so Europe is multi-ethnic, even historically speaking. In terms of its colonial influence, it had to deal with other nations, And so now those nations are coming back. You can argue that these nations that have been affected by European imperialism, they're sort of coming back, knocking on the door of Britain, if you will, knocking on the door of Europe, if you will, and saying, can we have a better life, But of course there's challenges as well, because nationalism has risen up and people are saying, well, wait a second, you're going to destroy our societies if you come in. Never mind that we barged into your door and a while ago, but, now you're barging into our door. So there's a process of friction there, And this combination of fear of the foreigner and nationalism has created a soup by which people are returning back to religion. Yes, religion. A lot of European countries realize that their national identities are tied into their religious identities. And because they're dealing with a religious problem, namely Islam, and because they're dealing with a foreign problem, a problem of foreigners, and them wanting to retain their culture, they realize that, and also because they're dealing with something called woke, or something called leftism, the moral decline of society, as they like to call it, they realize that a religious dimension is needed in order to preserve the culture. And this is where Christian nationalism comes in. And this is the dangerous thing, because because the Bible talks about two horns like a lamb, but speaking as a dragon. And so Europe had a whole bunch of church-state alliances in the colonial era, and it didn't go well for the foreigner. It didn't go well for other nations, right? When you have religion having the barrel of a gun, you're talking about some very immense, very big atrocities taking place. And so that's the fear of what people can revert to again, and what people will revert to, are reverting to. They see woke and they're like, heck no, we don't want any of that LGBTQ plus stuff. They see migration and they're like, we don't want any of that foreigner stuff. And what's the remedy? What are people saying? Well, religion, Even Richard Dawkins calls himself a cultural Christian, And this is where the danger comes in, because you have a union of church and state emerging. You have a necessity for this union emerging. And that's when the New World Order really starts coming into effect now, because you're going to have laws passed that are of a religious nature. And when religious laws are being passed of a religious nature, that is when the church and state come together. That is when nationalism and religious fanaticism come together. And you will have massive persecution of the foreigner, of migrants. You will have massive religious, and you will have persecution of religious minorities too, that don't toe the line with the state version of religiosity. Now this is all real. There is a migration crisis happening in Europe, and they are looking back to their religion. Like Poland has declared Jesus to be king of that nation, and it's happening all around. There's a lot of influence to go back to religion, and there's many proponents of Christian nationalism in America right now that want to go back to religion. As a Christian now, I'm talking as a Christian because I'm a firm believer. I want people to be quote unquote religious, but the way that's going about now, that is not the mechanism that I would endorse, because religion is not built by a militaristic, global hegemonic world power that persecutes other nations, that sanctions other nations. The Bible talks about no buying and selling, right? In Revelation 13, that sanctions other nations, that uses God as a way to crack down on those dissident elements of society, whether they're from the left or whether they're from foreigners, in order to establish a more moral society through force of arms, right? That's the picture. That's one picture of this new world order that's processing at the moment. The other picture is to just go about how we've always done it, and that's through speaking with people, engaging in open civil discussions, having debates, having discussions with people, and people voluntarily deciding whether they want to subscribe to religion or not, because a forced religion is a fake religion. It's not, you are not, that is not the way that Christ went about. There is no instance of Jesus ever saying to bring your naval armada with you as you go on missionary trips. And that is not the way. That is definitely not the way. And so what we're seeing now is a very dangerous situation. It's a concoction of many things. I think that the world is going through rapid changes, very rapid changes, and all these things are very significant. What's going on in the world today, and so Bible prophecy is absolutely 100% accurate, as I've outlined to you right now, and. Yes, take care, and I hope that this has been enlightening to you. Thanks. Bye.